And we are back. All right. So welcome back. Welcome back. We got a good friend of mine. Um, Friend of mine's been, man, what's it been? 5 years or so.
A
Um,
minute.
yeah, X is in the building. She is not only a sensational friend. The first time I got introduced to X back in Atlanta, the first thing somebody said to me was like, she's an amazing developer. Um, it wasn't like she's a Lakers fan. She likes the Warriors. Like nothing, none of that. Like first thing said is she's an amazing developer. So X, welcome. First of all, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing wonderful, honestly. It's been a very, very long week already. I feel like
Yeah,
working from home means working more for me. My calendar has been packed back to back. I've had to like schedule in bathroom breaks. It's been interesting, but feel very blessed to do the work that I do at Google and even more blessed to be able to share lessons that I've learned from my journey with the folks who are on the call today. And hopefully, folks walk away feeling like they can also get into the field of artificial intelligence.
for sure, for sure. So X, let's start kind of like in the early days. Where you from? Where you from?
Okay, so myself, I'm actually from Richmond, California. So for those of you who aren't familiar with sort of the geography or territory of California, you have like San Francisco, then you have like Oakland. You might have even heard of Berkeley. Those are all within like a 10-minute drive of each other. The city of Richmond is like maybe 5 minutes outside of Berkeley. During World War II, it was the place that had the most working class people. They built most of the ships for World War II. It was a bunch of steel factories. And after the war was over, it kind of just became a community of working class people that became a melting pot. So it's a dope community. There's tons of like Latino folks from all over different parts of Central and South America. There's a lot of indigenous folks. There's a lot of transplants from Africa, from different parts of India and Asia. So it truly is like a cultural hub, even though it's a lot of working class folks. So I love Richmond. I love my city. I'm actually down there like twice a week now. So got to go get my
Nice.
food stuff somewhere since the mission is all gentrified in San Francisco.
For sure. So kind of starting off, where did your interest start with technology?
Oh man. So I was always that kid that like was breaking stuff in the house. Like if we had like a VCR and it got stuck, I was the one that was like, give me the Phillips screwdriver. And I would like undo the whole thing and figure it out until I could fix it. Actually, one of my earliest memories as a kid, my dad, he had got me like a Barbie truck, like the little ones you ride around in that are like electric. And I
Yeah.
100% thought I was a mechanic, and I went underneath it and I like had my little big plastic screwdriver and I like broke the battery because I like ripped the cords out of the battery thinking I could fix it. So I think I've always just had like a natural pull to just like a natural pull to technology. As I got older, I mean, my family, just in all transparency, I grew up with 7 siblings. We were like super poor. So it was like if we had a computer, it was like one that we all shared. So I kind of like became more interested in computers specifically, just out of necessity, because like if, one of my siblings put a whole bunch of like spam or malware on the computer and I wanted to use it, I kind of had to like fix it to use it, because like they sure weren't gonna like take the time to do it. They were back outside playing games or riding bikes or whatever. So out of just the desire to be able to continue to use a computer, I kind of had to learn how to tinker with it, how to fix it.
Nice. So I think one of the interesting things of your story, I know you guys started kind of like in the earlier days, kind of similar to like when you guys started like building Myspace and stuff and
Okay.
working on everybody had their Myspace page.
Mm-hmm.
You have an interesting let's call it hack that you would do for like artists and stuff. Talk talk about
Oh
that. What
man.
happened there?
Yeah, I used to throw shade on MySpace. So like in high school I was like a mad loner. I mean, I got into tons of trouble in high school. So I had friends, they just weren't great friends. But part of what I did is I found a lot of my free time. I wanted to create art, but I had never taken like art classes. So of course, naturally I took to like MySpace pages, but I turned it into a hustle. So I sell people's like MySpace customizations. Like, oh, before they had the music feature, I was like putting music players on people's pages. But back in the day, there was a lot of beef when the Vans song came out. I don't know if you guys remember it. It was like, got my Vans on, but they look like sneakers, right? A lot of folks in the Bay Area were like, no, screw Vans, we wear Jordans. Like, we're the Bay Area, we do not wear skateboarder shoes. Keep that in Berkeley, we wear Jordans. So there was like a big rap beef going on where as soon as that song started to pop, there was like 10 other groups that started to diss them. And so what I would do is, and this is sad because these are my, like, the folks from the pack are my friends now, like Brandon and Lloyd. But basically, I went on their page and I like hacked into the code of the comments and made it so that I had an invisible music player. So it would freeze the JavaScript that I wrote. It would freeze their song from playing and start playing the diss track. So you would go and you would like load their page and it would be playing the like Screw the Vans song, We Like Jordans, instead of their actual Vans song. It was pretty funny. It was like early days of my cyber warfare career, I guess. But I did make a lot of money doing that, and I helped get a lot of artist plays that way.
So essentially, you started at Spotify, is what I heard.
More like Spotify.
No, that's awesome. Okay. So you're making your way. You're in your early days and stuff. You found yourself doing some interesting stuff for Army, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So talk about that. What were you doing while you when you listened to the Army?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of my life journey was that I actually am a high school dropout. So as smart as I thought I was, I got caught up in a lot of really bad things as a kid growing up in Richmond, and ended up deciding, instead of finishing high school traditionally, I was going to take the GED route. So when I did that, I started at a local community college out in the city of Berkeley. I was doing tons of just like work on myself to try to figure out like what I even wanted. And I just noticed there was a real lack of discipline overall. Like, I grew up again in a house of 7 people. It was mad chaotic. We didn't really have structure. That's part of the reason I was running the streets as a kid. So I made the decision after my freshman year of college, like, yo, I need something. I need something that's going to like teach me how to be a sane, structured adult. So I ended up joining the military. 2 of my older siblings had already joined the military. One is still in the military to this day. I joined the reserves. And when I joined the reserves, my first job, actually, I was a vehicle mechanic. So I was like, yo, I'm going to learn how to fix my own car. I'm going to like change my own oil. And then they had me take apart a Humvee and put it all the way back together, like engine all the way apart and put it back together. And I was like, yo, I am too small for this. I'm too tired. I ain't turning no wrenches. This is not the job for me. You are not going to catch me out here changing a big, like super big tires on anything. Like, it's just not going to be me. It's not going to happen. So when I was looking at other roles, my recruiter noticed that I had scored pretty high on certain parts of the ASVAB, which is the military entrance test. So I ended up switching over from being a vehicle mechanic to doing something called PSYOP. So for those of you who don't know, in the military, they have different branches of intelligence. Like, not everybody's an interrogator. Not everybody is out there like writing intelligence reports or spying on people. And the branch of intelligence that I went into, PSYOP, is psychological operations. So it's perception management and manipulation on a global scale. I know that's not the Army's definition. That's what I did. And so in that, it required a multifaceted set of skills, like an understanding of marketing, an understanding of individual psychology, of social psychology, of group behavior, of data analysis, data processing, being able to gather insights from these mass amounts of information that you're collecting to shape messaging against that. So nowadays, there's a lot of machine learning that can do that. Back in my day, I feel old saying this, it wasn't. It was a lot of people like me who would manually write reports or scripts to go through tens of thousands of intel reports to like garner common themes, like conducting interviews on the ground with folks. So while I was in the military, I really picked up a lot of SQL. I picked up a lot of Perl. I picked up a lot of what they call in the mainstream market, I think, ethical hacking, which is basically like penetration testing. So network defense, network penetration, figuring out how to get access to data you may or may not should have access to. And when I deployed to Afghanistan, I actually was the operational data manager for the headquarters of all special operations at the time. So it was a new command. I worked cross-functionally with every country that was represented there. So you're talking US, ISAF, NATO, something like 200 countries, gathering up their data and figuring out ways to build new insights from it. So that's all I can say, because the rest of that's classified, and I don't want the NSA coming to knock down my door. But yeah, the military, I got a lot of really good programming experience, and I think my deployment in particular, because when you're in Afghanistan, like, you know, I did do a lot of stuff outside of the wire. So I did do like 500 convoy missions, driving trucks back and forth all over the country. But you end up working like 20 hours a day. So when you're a coder, if you're practicing coding even 8 out of 20 hours every day, like nonstop, and just around folks who know more than you, it really helps you, one, understand how you learn, and two, really helps you understand and build skills very quickly because you're constantly learning and constantly applying at the same time. So I do credit the military with a lot of my solid technical foundations, as well as just foundations to myself, like understanding who I am, how I learn, how to learn through stress, how to manage stress, all came from those experiences.
So talk about that a little bit. Like you said, how you learn. How did you gain that insight and on how you learn specifically?
I think the number one thing is there are two things you have to be. If you want to figure out how you learn, because this is my theory, if you can learn how you learn, you can teach yourself anything. But there are two things you have to have in order to learn how you learn. The first is you have to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself. If you're watching a video and the way the person is explaining it makes no sense to you, don't keep watching that video. Find a video that resonates with you. If you pick up a textbook and you realize that you're spacing out every 20 seconds, and then you pick up another one that, even if that second book you pick up is entertaining and you think it should hold your attention and you don't, maybe you're not the type of person to learn from books. Maybe that's just not your learning style. So you have to be honest with yourself about what is and isn't working. The second thing is you have to be brave enough. You have to be brave enough to admit that to yourself, not just like, oh, this guy's video series doesn't work for me, or this book is just written in a way that I don't understand. There's always going to be some element of work, so don't just quit. But you also have to be brave enough to go find instruction in the way that you need. So me personally, the way that I learn, I'm better when I can get the gist of a concept and then talk it out with somebody. So if I could find someone who knows more about that than me, and I could sit down with them and pick their brain and make it make sense in a way that makes sense to me, I always do like references, right? So I'm like, oh, so you're talking about a class. So like how they talk about classes of cars, like a truck, a SUV, a this, and then like the parameters of the class would be this. And a function of the class would be like, you know, stopping and starting a brake, like figuring out kind of like how things work and making mental models in my own mind is what I needed. But I was mad antisocial. Like I came home from Afghanistan. I don't want to be around all y'all. So I had to be brave enough to go out, to go to meetups, to go to developer groups, to join up with different, I was in like code. When I lived in Atlanta, I was in like Code for America. I was helping them when they did the first EBT solution. I went to hackathons all the time. I started mentoring in hackathons because that was a cool new way for me to understand the way people were thinking about problems and how to solve them. So I think if you want to learn how you learn, you have to be, one, honest enough with yourself to know what is and isn't working. Like, don't lie to yourself. Don't just sit there and watch. I love YouTube University, but don't put yourself through an hour and a half of a video that doesn't make sense to you. If you don't get a concept, pause the video, go look for something that helps you find that concept. It might be a visual explanation. It might be a video explanation. It might mean you need to chat with someone like Marlon or myself or Whitney, who's on the call right now. What's up, Whitney? And be able to connect with developers and, you know, folks in the community who have that knowledge and who will work with you to get it. But I really, truly, honestly believe, as somebody who switched through so many different careers, like I started out in WordPress development. I started out as a front-end developer at first, making like PHP skins for WordPress websites. And then our back-end person left, so then I had to learn the back-end. And I became a full-stack developer. Then this wonderful new thing came out called Model View Controller Apps. So I was all up learning Angular. And then after Angular, it was React. And it was back to Angular. And then all these different design frameworks. Like when Bootstrap came out, you had to learn Bootstrap. Everything had to be bootstrapped and everything had to be responsive. The industry that you're in as a developer, whether it's artificial intelligence or not, is never going to stop changing. There's always going to be new things. So your job as a developer to build stability in that is to make sure that you know how to adapt yourself to the market's needs. So for example, if Wix and Squarespace take over and they don't need regular front-end developers for anything anymore, what are you going to do to prepare yourself to learn the next skill? And so, yeah, I'm just a huge proponent of learning how you learn. There's actually a course on it. I haven't personally taken the course, but I saw it on edX the other day. There's actually a course on like, learn how you learn. Like, and it's like neuroscience backed. I don't know. I personally am not going to take it, but I think you can do that self-discovery on your own. But if you're into that type of thing, there are tons of resources out there to help you learn your learning style. If you're a visual learner, if you're an auditory learner, if you're a kinetic learner, meaning you need to touch it, play with it to figure it out. I'm a little bit of a combination of all three. So.
For sure. So you're in the Army, you know, you're in the reserves. While you're out there too, you found yourself, you say you was in Afghanistan. Didn't you go to another country as well? And as you was continuing to work and learn.
Yeah, so I was in Afghanistan. While I was in Afghanistan, I did make a couple of round trips to some places. I went to Belgium. I went to Germany. When I got out of the military deployment, I ended up working at a small boutique firm in Atlanta for a while, and then I joined Microsoft. And that's where I did a lot of my international travel. So at Microsoft, I worked in what they call their national security group, which is a group of Microsoft employees that work for companies like the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the DIA, the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security. So I was a software engineer in that group. And while I was there, man, I went to like Canada, I went to Germany. I ended up, oh, snap, I forgot. Right before I went to Microsoft, because Microsoft hired me from this job. Man, I've been doing so much, can't even remember where I've been working. But right before I went to Microsoft, I was working for a company that was based in DC, but then they sent me to go live and work in Japan. So I worked between the US and Japanese government. And that job was so cool. It was like the first time I ever really got to apply machine learning techniques or artificial intelligence techniques in a job. Basically, long story short, they were trying to construct a new military base. The Japanese locals didn't want that military base in that location. So they were having a lot of issues with nonviolent protests. So it was like they would go and just block construction from happening. There's nothing machine learning can do to solve that. But another protest that they were doing was they were leaking all the construction plans. So they would hack into the networks and then they would like leak the construction plans so that they'd have to start over from scratch. So I went out there and I built a secure data management system for all the construction projects that not only was secure enough so that they could send it between the US and Japanese governments, but it also did auto translation of key elements of the project plans. So this is unclassified. I promise the NSA isn't going to come looking for you because I told you this. But it was really awesome. I got to live in Japan. Okinawa, Japan is still one of my favorite places. It's like a tropical island. I love it. You guys got to go. If you go anywhere in Japan, go to Okinawa. I promise. It's beautiful. It's like a Caribbean island. It's gorgeous.
So thank you for keeping the secret, because we don't want the NSA to shut down the stream either. So you find your way to Microsoft. Actually, you had a pretty unique introduction to Microsoft. You didn't necessarily apply. How did you get there?
Oh, Microsoft. So before, it's so funny. Microsoft slid in my DMs. I was on LinkedIn. I had a crappy profile. My picture was all janky. It was like a picture of me on the beach in Okinawa. My descriptions are trash, but I had put in my LinkedIn, which you're actually not supposed to do, please don't do this, that I had a security clearance. So they DM'd me and they were like, hey, we have like 10 roles that we would take you for because of your clearance. And to be honest, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So when the woman DM'd me, she was a Black woman recruiter. She was amazing. We still keep in touch to this day. She's been promoted a couple of times at the company. I was like, yo, there's no way I'm going to like fail the interview. I don't want to go. I don't even want to try. So it took me 3 months to reply to her, and she expedited all my interviews. And so I think she hit me up maybe in like August. I replied like early December, and I started at Microsoft at the end of December. So that was really awesome.
So talk about that. With that imposter syndrome, because I think a lot of us, if not all of us, deal with that. And you're talking about the imposter syndrome where it was holding you back from kind of like leveling up. So talk about how you can combat that a little bit with the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so I think number one is just recognize that if somebody is hitting you up, it's because they see value in you, and you just have to believe that. Like in my new favorite animated movie, the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I don't know if you guys have seen it. That's my joint. I'm a huge sci-fi like animated nerd too. So basically one of the things they say is like, how do you know when you're ready? And the response is you don't. It's a leap of faith. And I really believe that to resonate is that you're not always going to feel qualified. You're not always going to feel like you're the hot shit in the room, like, yo, sorry for my language. I don't know what other words to plug in. But you're not always going to feel like, you're the smartest person around, and you shouldn't be. Honestly, your job is to continuously improve yourself and not be perfect. So if you're measuring yourself against an imaginary perfect, like, well, this person went to this place, and I looked up other employees at Microsoft or at Google or at Facebook, and they all went to Ivy League schools, and they all went to, they all have masters and I only have a bachelor's, or look, they've worked at 4 other major consulting companies and I couldn't even get into any one of those. Like, don't let that stop you from communicating your own value. I'm someone who has a GED. I have no college degree. I'm a global outreach lead in two of Google's largest departments. So I'm split between Google AI and Google Global Affairs. So I deal with every single product area at Google. I am in a room on a day-to-day basis with folks who have amplitudes more education than I do. Like almost everyone on my team has at least a master's or a PhD. Like some of the people on my team were former high-level executives at companies like PayPal or, other companies. And so to be in that space and to just feel confident that the value that I bring is enough, otherwise they wouldn't cut me my check. Like if I was sucked, I'd be fired. That's just the way I look at it. So as long as I'm performing to my standard of what's good enough for me and checking in with my manager to make sure that that standard matches what she expects in my performance, that's the only judgment that I can contain. We all have different paths and we all have different ways that we've come to be in these spaces. So just trust yourself that you know your path, you know how you got here, and that you know what weight you need. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't go into the gym next to some dude that's super buff and be like, oh man, I'm too skinny to like lift these weights. Like, nah, man, just lift the weights at your weight. Like, you ain't got to go bench press 500 pounds, Arnold Schwarzenegger to weights. You could just pick up the 5-pound weights and do 10 reps, and that's good enough for you. So I think another thing is building in practices where you practice communicating and demonstrating your value helps as well. So sometimes work is really hard. It's really stressful. Google's not a place that like people are out here like, yo, let me give you props every 2 seconds because you did something good. Like it's just expected. So I do a lot of giving back because that's what helps me remember how far I've come. Like I mentor a lot of startups. I mentor in a lot of startup accelerators. I mentor a lot of junior developers. I have like 3 mentees at work formally who are like junior in their career, who are like, how do I talk like you do on a video call? Like I get nervous. What are your techniques? What do you do to relax? Like, so just also remembering like doing things to document your own distance traveled story. Mine is in the form of giving back and being of service. Yours might be like, yo, keep a quarterly list of your running accomplishments. Do you update your resume every quarter? Do you, like every time you do something good, do you have like a I love me folder at work where you like drop your documents that are like, yo, I killed it on this project, or yo, this was my best documentation I've ever written, like almost like trinkets to remember what you do to do good. Because at the end of the day, you're the only person that walks in your shoes every single day of your life. And so that's on you to remember the distance that you've traveled and the journey you've come on. But the only way to do that clearly is to not put your footsteps next to anyone else's and be like, well, they got bigger feet or they take longer strides, just be focused on your path and surround yourself with people who lift you up too. Like if you got hater friends, they need to go. It's 2020. Leave your hater friends in 2019. You need friends who are telling you, yes, chase your dreams, living my best life, right? Like you need folks who will really like help build you up.
So you said something interesting there where a lot of people, your colleagues that you work with, either have more education than you do, more experience and stuff. So, similar to you, I got my GED as well. And, so talk about from an individual who comes from getting a GED, no college degree, and working at Buy for probably one of, top 5, top 10 companies and stuff in the world. That whole process.
No.
Top 5. So that whole process, and coming from where you come from, what are some of the things, what are some of the principles somebody has to hold tight to them to endure such a path?
Okay, so I'm going to be really, really real right now. You cannot have a college education and do whatever you want, but the path is completely different. And what that means is you still have to find ways to communicate your expertise in ways that they're listening to. So you can't just say, well, I know I'm good at coding because I code every day. You have to have projects, tangible projects that somebody can dissect. They can look at, they can look under the hood at your code, see your thought process. You still, if you're coming into Google in a technical role, it doesn't matter if you have a college degree or not. You still have to go through the coding screen. So you still have to have skills that are built up in yourself to come in and be like, pass through the same screeners and open up the same doors. Now, for me, what that looked like as someone who didn't have a lot of like traditional education, I went the path of certifications, but I was strategic about the certifications I got. I got a lot of like the Microsoft certified developer certifications that showed that I knew how to do C#, I knew how to do .NET, I knew how to do APIs. And I didn't go with like you have to do your vetting as well. There's a lot of certifications on the market. Not a lot of them are taken seriously by recruiters, right? So you could go get a certification in JavaScript, but wasting your time on that certification might not have the same impact as you building 10 to 15 projects inside of your GitHub using JavaScript. And they don't have to be standard projects that are going to become the next big startup. Like I remember one of the first things that I built just because I'm a nerd was like a Pokemon trader. It was like an app to trade Pokemon cards, right? I was like, yo, I love Pokemon. Like back in the day, like 2008, I was like super close to high school still. Like I'm gonna build a Pokemon trader website where you could like trade cards and it's gonna pull from all this data. And like, you know, when I first started playing around with machine learning models and when I was doing like image generation models, it was like, yo, I want this thing to generate a Pokemon character for me. Like learn from all the Pokemon that have been here. I'm going to give you a color. I'm going to give you a skill. You're going to generate a name and an image for this Pokemon. And like, you know, it doesn't have to be anything that's crazy. It doesn't have to be anything that's showing that you have a PhD in computer science level understanding. You're just demonstrating that you have the skills. So think about it on a smaller scale. If we take technology out of the equation, when you go in to be a cashier somewhere, they're going to want to know if you can count money. Doesn't matter if you have a math degree. Doesn't matter if you went to college or not. Can you do the essential functions of the job? So when you think about crafting your resume, when you think about projects you want to work on, when you think about how you document, how you code things, practicing the things that will show that you can meet the essential functions of the job. So also doing things like when you code a project, practice coding your project against a style guide. Right. So there's tons of style guides out there that you can use. Like Google has a public one. I know Microsoft and Twitter and a whole bunch of other companies have public style guides that you can use to like show, hey, not only can I code, I can code my stuff to a specification, which is what will be required of me when I come into a big company. So I think just one, being real about not just having the skill set, but being able to demonstrate that skill set in a way that shows that you can do the core functions of that role. So keeping project documentation, if you use LinkedIn, getting your colleagues to recommend you, like OG vouch is still a really, really big thing. It's just different. It's called a LinkedIn recommendation now. So like, you know, maybe, you know, you could count, but like your boss is like, hey man, your brother used to work here. I'm gonna talk to your brother about you. It's before I see if you're my cashier. Now you can have digital recommendations. You can have, make sure that your references are strong. Make sure that your references know what to speak to about you. Give them a bullet point list of what they should speak about, especially if you're talking about folks from older jobs. Like they probably don't remember, like people have lives just as much as you do and don't remember everything you did just like you don't. So as much as you could prepare the way that you're thinking about how to build your skill set, also be thinking about how to communicate that in the way that recruiters, managers are looking for. And if you don't know what those qualifications are, that's where you need a mentor. That's where you need someone that you can reach out to. You could even do what's called informational chats. So I recommend this for all the military veterans that I mentor when they're getting out of the military. It's like, yo, just DM people on LinkedIn, tell them, look, I'm interested in getting into this field. If you have time, I would love to set up a quick 15-minute chat with you to learn more about your job and what you do and what it means. And like, I'm trying to make sure I'm preparing myself right. 9 out of 10 people will respond to you. I take informational chats all the time. I set up time with college students, with folks who want to transition careers, with social scientists who are like, how do I get into this space? What are some of the key things I need to know? You know, what is it like going through the interview process at Google? Just all types of questions. So again, remember, we talked about being honest and being brave. So you gotta be honest enough with yourself about the realities of the market that you still have to demonstrate competency. That could be through a certification, through projects, through references, or a combination of those. And then you got to be brave enough. So if you don't know what those things are, to go figure out who are the people that you can tap into to get that information.
So you said, you know, you've done some things of mentoring and helping people get information. One of the things that you helped me with that had something that directly that you was doing in your day-to-day is blockchain. You found yourself to be leading some of the blockchain program stuff at Microsoft. What was that? What did it
yeah,
like?
So I actually got into blockchain at a Google developer garage and a makerspace in Atlanta, is how I really got into using blockchain. I was working on a Java project with this dude, and I was trying to learn Java for a backend. Please don't do that to yourself. Don't suffer that way. But I was working with some homies and my friend was like, yo, you know about crypto? I was like, yeah, man, I did my little fair share of Bitcoin trading, but I didn't really understand the technologies underneath. So I read the fundamental like Bitcoin paper. We went through, I was like, I don't understand half of this because I didn't have advanced math. I was like, I need help. What the heck is a Markov chain? Like, help me out. And so I was just like picking his brain all the time. And then I started to build my own blockchain products. In 2014, a startup that I was working with in the Bay Area called SyncFab, we did an ICO, an initial coin offering. We did which was like just a token sale back then. It didn't have all this fancy language. And we ended up raising $15 million in like a week. Off of our initial token sale. Since then, I've consulted with tons of different startups across many different ways. I actually have sold my own blockchain startup to another company instead of to a VC, more focused in the hemp space, the cannabis hemp space, a blockchain startup that now focuses on hemp track and trace instead of cannabis, and I've mentored tons. So when I was at Microsoft, I started to like find out who the blockchain people were, and we're like, yo, let me help you sell this technology. Like, I know artificial intelligence, I know IoT, the Internet of Things, just as a facet of like, oh, this is the next cutting edge thing. What's the API I need to learn? And how do these devices work? And how do I factor this into the environment? Let me help plug that into a larger conversation. So at Microsoft, I was actually their first blockchain ambassador. I worked very closely with the global black belt team in blockchain to help drive sales and architecture of a lot of major use cases that happen. But again, it was like I knew how I learned. So when I wanted to learn more about blockchain, you won't come into my house and see a whole bunch of blockchain books because that's not how I learned. I have a lot of really great mentors in the space. I put time on people's calendar. I did self-study. I watched tons of YouTube videos. I read papers and asked people questions. Like, I would read scientific research papers about blockchain and email the author and be like, I have a question. Can you set up time with me? Like, and it's crazy, right? Like, not just, and they wouldn't, and I would do it from my Gmail. So it's not like they're answering to me just because I have the app Microsoft. It's like, yo, I really want to understand blockchain and I don't get what this means. Can you point me in the right direction? Can you hop on a call to explain this? And just like reaching out to folks to figure it out more. So yeah, I was a part of like constructing a lot of their sales materials, a lot of their executive conversations, involved in a lot of RFPs, which are, like responding to like public calls for content. I was a part of the $10 billion RFP that they won. I was a part of a $2 billion Air Force RFP that we won on my own. I sold a couple $100 million worth of deals in conjunction with the global black belt team for IoT and blockchain. And just really, man, I was crushing it. It was cool. It was like the same way I'm talking to you guys right now, I was able to do with blockchain.
Sweet. So now, talk about the transition and stuff to leaving Microsoft to go to Google, and because you definitely got to so you got to Google and start to focus not on blockchain but AI. Then, so what was that transition like?
Yeah, so we talked about imposter syndrome a little bit earlier. I think for me, looking back at Microsoft, I realized how much value I brought, but that value didn't always feel like it was reflected to me in my day-to-day. And this isn't a knock to Microsoft at all. It's a great company. If you get to Microsoft, go there, stay there. It was my experience. I wasn't happy with my team. I wasn't happy with my role. The kind of culture fit was a mismatch. Like, obviously I have like a really big personality, and they kind of wanted me to like be a little quiet, just stop doing like at one point my manager was like, you got to stop doing all this blockchain stuff. It's too much. And I'm like, dude, I just helped the company make hundreds of millions. Like, no, I'm not going to stop doing it. And so for me, I was scared. I was scared to leave. I was scared that Microsoft was the peak of my career. I was scared that I wasn't going to be able to reach anything higher, that I wasn't qualified for anything else, and kind of the doubt of the contributions that I was feeling from like my manager telling me to like slow down in some ways, and maybe you shouldn't do that, and just like not feeling supported in the stuff that I was passionate about made me feel like I was inadequate. So actually the way I started to transition into Google, I was giving a talk at Afrotech at like a Microsoft event, and this dude from Google came up to me and he was like, I want you to come to Google. And I was like, Google is evil as hell. I'm not gonna like, I don't want to come to Google. Like, what? And I don't think that about Google now that I know what I know about the company, but that was my perception then. So I just want to say, I'm not stating that as a Google employee, that Google is evil as hell. That was my perception before I joined the company. But he reached out to me, told me, no, you don't understand. Like, you need to help make this information make sense to the rest of the world. Like, yes, of course, companies need it, but we need you as a community. Like, the community needs you to translate a lot of this work. So I was like, yeah, okay. I did the imposter syndrome thing. I stayed at Microsoft for another 3 months. And when I stayed there for another 3 months, it just got worse. I was like so stressed out. I started having like stomach issues, started to like break out. I was like tired all the time. I was like unhappy. I started to like get depressed and like not feel good about myself in other ways. And I was like, yo, I got to get out of this. And so I reached out to him as a program manager. He was like, okay, put in your application, go through the interview process. So I did, but simultaneously, a Google recruiter who specialized in military veterans had slid in my DMs. So she hit me up. So I had like, and then this like Google Cloud guy was trying to like poach me to go to Google Cloud. So I had like 3 people trying to bring me in at the same time. So normally like a Google process takes like, I don't know, almost 2 months to hire you. They did all my process end to end from first interview to offer in like 3 weeks. And when I came, I had a choice. I actually could have gone to YouTube. They had a role with my skill set to like build out and manage the creator program. So like managing the one-to-one relationship with celebrities, or this team called ML Fairness, which is machine learning fairness. Machine learning fairness is a research field that focuses specifically on how do you stop an algorithm from being biased on a mathematical mechanical level. Now, there are definitely other factors that go into it, because bias is not just the way the algorithm's built, it's also the way we perceive a system. So it's more of like a socio-technical research team. Like they actually have 2 social scientists on the team that are like research scientists in that space. So I joined that team to help build that effort out. And and you know, just being in a different environment where people believe in you, they were like, yo, X, we know you're skilled. Like you don't have to constantly double check everything with us. Like go do it, try it out, come report back. And in my first like 60 days of being hired, I got like 5 peer bonuses. One of my projects had almost 250 million media impressions, which is like insane, you know, to be able to switch from that environment. But I really do want to say, because I know part of what we wanted to talk about was like, how do you make that transition from like a regular developer into getting into artificial intelligence too, right? So a couple of points on that. There's a whole bunch of different types of AI. So artificial intelligence is just a general term that we use to describe machines that can do things that would require human intelligence, right? So that could be anything. Machines that use or artificial intelligence doesn't always have to have like machine learning, deep neural networks, like because the term is so general. So a lot of times when you hear AI, what you're hearing about is machine learning, which is like the most popular type of artificial intelligence. So machine learning fairness is machine learning specifically is a field within AI that focuses on teaching machines to patterns from large data sets. So you basically feed it a huge data set, then it learns the patterns from that, and then it spits out predictions or outcomes. So for example, if I'm trying to teach an algorithm to like identify spam for me, right? I would give it a whole bunch of examples of emails that are labeled as spam, a whole bunch of emails of examples that are like, yo, these are examples of what's not spam. I would just feed it into the algorithm. And then over time, the more examples that I give it, the better it would get at telling the difference between spam and not spam. So machine learning algorithms are being used across the country in a lot of really, I don't want to say, what's the word I can say, in a lot of ways that are concerning for me as an individual. So like machine learning algorithms are being used to do things like decide if somebody's at risk of recommitting a crime. So like in court systems, they have these pre-trial sentencing programs. So they'll feed a whole bunch of data into an algorithm about somebody who's been arrested for a crime or sentenced for a crime, and it'll predict whether or not that person is likely to reoffend, and that affects the judge's sentence. And those algorithms have been shown through research to be biased towards people of color. You have a recent mishap with United Healthcare Group, where they were using algorithms to help doctors determine who needed to be treated or not. But they trained the algorithms, the data sets that they used were not like a person's individual history. It was like, how likely is this person to spend X amount of money? Because their thought was like, yo, if you're more sick, you end up spending more money. What they didn't account for was the fact that like, people don't always have high quality insurance. Like low income, poor folks don't have high quality insurance. There's a lot of cultural nuances, like Black and brown people don't necessarily trust health facilities. Like my grandma used to tell me, don't go to the doctor until you absolutely have to, right? And so it's like, because they didn't count for those factors, that algorithm, which was servicing 30 million people, it would literally tell doctors to treat healthy Caucasian people over sick African American and Latino people because it was based on this misconception and bad data. So machine learning is really important because it's driving a lot of our decisions of the future. So things like, should you get a home loan or not? Should you get this car loan or not? Should you get admitted into this job or not? Like when they have like machine learning, like when you do just sometimes on some platforms, when you do like job interviews that are like analyzing your face and your facial expressions to see if like you'd be a good candidate and a good culture fit. So even though machine learning may seem like an abstracted technology, it is 100% driving everything in the future. So the field of machine learning fairness really called to me. From a moral perspective, I feel like, my grandmother was a teacher. She's from Albany, Georgia. She taught through segregation as a Black woman. She got her master's degree as a Black woman in the early 1960s in a really segregated university. She had to couldn't even learn to type, had to pay someone to type her thesis for her. So I felt like in honor of my ancestors, especially after doing tons of national security work, coming into this space was really, really important.
So as far as everybody's listening, what are some of the things that, you mentioned a few of them, but what are some of the things specifically that will AI influence and stuff, in 5 to 10 years? And even more so, what are some of the things that would affect our day-to-day that we may not think of currently right now?
Okay.
Actually, hold on. The live, it dropped. There it is. Okay. No, there it is. Okay. So I'm my question. So, what are some of the things? Yeah. So, what are some of the things that AI will influence or affect our day-to-day living in the future that we may not see or think of currently right now?
It's already affecting a lot of it. And I know this because I worked with a lot of different companies to build it out at Microsoft, as well as have insight into here. But to give you an example, there's a quote, I'm gonna pull it up real quick, from McKinsey around just on a monetary impact of AI. So AI is expected to increase economic output by $13 trillion in the next decade. There's no industry that's going to be untouched by artificial intelligence, whether that's helping you. Right now, machine learning specifically, it's kind of like, it's the voice recognition. It's your Siri. It's your Google Voice Assistant. It's your Alexa, which is real cool and convenient. It's also your Google search results. It's when you're in your email and it's prompting you to auto complete something, right? Machine learning is 100% taking over everything. Actually, Eric Schmidt, who some of you may or may not know, he's a former executive at Google, and he's now a chairman of the board, he was a chairman of the board till Sundar took over. But Eric Schmidt said, it was 2018, he was machine learning will drive every successful huge IPO win in the next 5 years. And so far, he's been pretty correct in that prediction. So not only is it going to shift the way that business is done, it's also going to shift the reality for us as workers in those systems. So a lot of the tasks that are kind of being automated are seen as things that are by working class folks. So you look at the Amazon Go stores, the cashierless checkouts, right? And that's not necessarily you just going and scanning something that's not a self-checkout. The stores that know who you are when you walk in, you grab your items off the shelf and you walk out and it charges your credit card. That's the future of retail. That's what every retail provider is pushing for and trying to do. There is a couple different types of artificial intelligence. The first is narrow AI, which is weak AI, which is where we're at now, which is where AI is limited to a certain subset of tasks because it has it's trained on data, right? So there's a limit to what it can learn. Even though your Siri or your Google Voice Assistant seems all knowing, when you're okay, Google, play the song for me, it's trained to go to a specific service and then pull up that song and play it for you. It's not trained to figure out where to go find that song. It's a feature that's been programmed into it. So that's called narrow AI or weak AI. That's where most AI is today. The second type of AI is called general AI or generalized AI. They call that strong AI. So that's the type of AI that you see in sci-fi movies. If you ever seen a movie, Her, where like the dude falls in love with this computer, or like, you know, it's basically AI that can operate on a same level that humans can. It's an idea that it might have a consciousness. It can perform all tasks like we can. It could like move through the world in the same way that a human can navigate things. That AI doesn't exist yet, but it's the like AI arms race, if you will. Everyone's trying to get to artificial general intelligence. Like that is the next big race. Microsoft just dropped $1 billion on it with OpenAI. Google has DeepMind that's working diligently around the clock to try to figure out new ways to do artificial generalized intelligence. And then you have the third class of AI, which is like super AI, which is like the stuff you see in sci-fi movies, which is like, oh snap, we made AI that's smarter than us. It's outsmarted us. It's leaving us in the dust. That's like the AI that Elon Musk is like, yo, it's going to kill us all, right? And so we're not there yet. It's very much a hypothetical, but we are making major strides towards getting towards that generalized AI. So when you think about it, don't just think of AI as some chatbot on your cell phone provider's website, or, you know, when you're on there trying to like navigate a discount on your bill, or I don't want to talk on the phone, I'm going to use a chatbot. All that is like V1 of AI. That's all narrow and weak AI. The next phase is going to be that generalized AI that's really, really going to impact us in a much larger way, because the AI will be infinitely more capable of doing more things.
So with engineers and stuff that we have listening in now, what are some of the next steps that an individual can make if they want to start to like learn and get into AI, maybe like figure out how to build their own projects and stuff?
All right, so I have 3 skills that you absolutely have to have. These skills are all available, and what I'll do, I have a little like list over here of a bunch of courses that you can take completely for free to help you get each of these skills. So number 1, AI and machine learning is based on data. Whether you're doing deep neural networks, whether you're doing machine learning, which we didn't really get to talk about deep neural networks today, but machine learning is the most popular. So I really recommend that you start there. You need data skills. You need to understand what is good data, what's bad data. It doesn't mean you have to be a data scientist, but understanding basic data science principles wouldn't hurt. How to analyze, how to look for things like covariance, how to look for things inside of your data set, like where is there, you know, like what is the, like just basic data analysis skills. I don't want to like list off a bunch of statistical principles and scare you guys away. So there are tons of free courses out there. On edX, I know UC Berkeley has one. I know Harvard has one. Both of those courses are phenomenal. They focus on different programming languages. The Harvard one focuses on R, which is a programming language that's used by a lot of life sciences, a lot of social sciences, and then the UC Berkeley one focuses on data science. And right now, thanks to COVID, all that stuff is free. The second thing you need to have is programming skills. So a lot of you that are already engineers, just understanding the fundamentals of AI is really, really important in the way that it works. So there's 2 resources I recommend, which I'll drop in here. The first is the University of Helsinki has a course called The Elements of AI, which walks you through a lot of what I just talked you through in a little bit more in-depth way, and explains things like deep neural networks, how machine learnings learn from patterns, like how does it actually work on a technical level, some of the key differences between programming regular programs between that. And then Google has a free course. It's called the Machine Learning Crash Course. So Google created an open source programming library called TensorFlow. And TensorFlow is really amazing because before you had to hand code your machine learning model end to end, but TensorFlow makes it exponentially easier to build machine learning models. And V2 of that is actually something called AutoML. So if you're someone who wants to tinker with the skills you have now before like committing a whole bunch of time, you can go check out 2 things. One, you could check out Diagflow, which again, I'll put all this in here. Diagflow is a almost like a drag and drop interface for you to do natural language processing. Natural language processing is when you teach computers to understand speech or words, right? So basically, you could drag and drop your own chatbot, which is like a really cool way to just get familiar with the concepts. If you have basic understandings of API, you can go through this, you know, some of this Diagflow stuff and figure it out while doing maybe the machine learning crash course, which is free, so that you can get some of the like machine learning content and practice in there while you're generalizing, making maybe, I don't know, a project or 2, right? The second thing is AutoML. So Auto Machine Learning or AutoML platform is something that Google Cloud released, and it's a way to train models with little or no coding experience. This is very much a black box experience. So you'll put in a whole bunch of data that you've labeled, and then it will output predictions based on what you're trying to train it to do. It's also a cool way to get familiar with the concepts, and those Those systems are actively in use by places like Moorfield Hospital, which is the largest research hospital in the UK, the largest eye hospital in the UK. So they've, out of that, using AutoML, have worked on things to like help diagnose when people with diabetes are going to go blind using that system, having their actual research scientists who don't know how to code it all use that platform. So I think, one, you need data skills. You got to understand data. If you're going to train a machine learning models learn from data. So you kind of got to learn data. That doesn't mean you have to become a SQL king or queen or person, whatever your pronouns are. It just means that you need to understand how to analyze data, how to determine what quality data is, how to kind of put data together in a way that it can be prepared for a machine learning model. And you need the coding skills. Top 2 ways to build machine learning models right now are Python and Python. That's what I'm going to tell you. So learn Python if you want to build machine learning models. You can have data prep skills in R, but majority of stuff that I've seen on the market for machine learning models has been Python. All the coolest open source libraries, all of the coolest ways to build them are in that. And the second thing that you need are some math skills. So if you are going to build your own machine learning models from scratch, you do need linear algebra. Linear algebra is a pain in the buttocks. I don't know how else to say it. It was not my favorite thing to learn, but there are tons of great resources out there for you to learn it, and you learn it once and then you just get to apply it. So if you stopped at like a high school algebra, that's okay. There's a book I can drop in here to recommend that walks you back through basic algebra concepts all the way up to linear algebra concepts. I think it's called No Bullshit Linear Algebra that I reference a lot because I'm not a mathematician and did not take those classes in college and have to constantly refer back to them just to make sure I'm not screwing up formulas. You also have things like Khan Academy, which give you practice. They're gamified. You also have things like Microsoft has released a course called Essential Mathematics for Machine Learning, right? On a platform like edX. So you can work on that as well. The third thing that you need is the ability to understand the world around you. So we talked about algorithms and we talked about how they can be skewed towards certain groups of people. So as an engineer, when you build machine learning models, your responsibility is a little different. It's not the same as just, oh, I made it accessible. The colors and the contrast of my website are accessible for visitors. And like, I don't have text on images. And so I'm meeting the W3C's accessibility standards. It goes beyond that. You are now building systems that will make decisions with little to no human oversight. So if you're building a machine learning model that can negatively impact someone's future, just imagine if a system at a company, a huge bank, an international bank, decides that women just shouldn't get home loans. How would that reshape our world? So it's not just on you to make your things mathematically correct. It's also on your kind of like purview as a machine learning developer to understand the societal impact. So becoming a machine learning developer is not just about, oh, I can make an algorithm, oh, I got linear algebra down pat. It's also kind of becoming more of a socio-technical expert, understanding how your algorithm will be used. What's the context it's going to be used in? What are the negative impacts of this algorithm if it misperforms? How are you planning for that? Because algorithms are going to fail, right? But you have to make sure that you're preparing yourself for that. And I can't tell you the best way to do that. There's tons of books you can read around the way that they failed, but also you can go look for things like, go take a humanities class, go take an ethics class, go take a tech ethics class, go take the machine learning crash course from Google with the fairness module. Yeah, I love that book. That's one of my favorite books, man. You might want to go and like, there's books like Algorithms of Oppression, Weapons of Math Destruction, right? Like all of these books that highlight how these things have failed if you need more context on how they don't work. But the understanding society, I can't tell you how to do that because I feel like I'm constantly learning. Have diverse groups of friends, listen to them when they talk about their lived experience. Maybe go take a class in a culture that doesn't represent yours. Like, me, I'm Afro-Latina, so like I'll go take an Asian American studies class. I'll go take a class on perceptions of, Taiwanese people or understanding the Taiwanese-Chinese conflict a little bit better. So if I'm building something for that market, I'm doing it with sensitivity for the societal context that it'll operate in. And a lot of people don't do that, which is how you end up with those bad headlines. Like 30 million people were being told, or were working with an algorithm that was saying that healthy Caucasian people needed to be treated over sick Black and brown people. Like, we don't need the world to replicate the worst parts of us through the technology we build, when that same technology can improve our lives substantially. So make sure that you're doing your part as a developer to learn about the world around you. So again, those kind of 3 core skill buckets. One, you got to have data and programming skills. I'll drop links to courses in the chat for you guys to see. Second, you need math skills. It sucks. You're going to have to do it. If you go for a drag and drop platform like AutoML or like Diagflow, then you might not need as much math skills or any math skills, but then you're severely limited in what you could build to what those tools offer you, right? So if you want to do something more custom or integrated in a different way, you're limited to those service offerings. And the third thing is just around you, so that you don't end up building some algorithm that ends up harming people more than it helps them.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're going to dive into Q&A. I'm here. Let me scroll back. I thought I saw some earlier. All right, so yeah, this is it. This is being recorded. I will send out emails either later this week or early next week. Okay, so Faisal asked his first question. Faisal says, "Are there any AI certifications that you would recommend getting?"
Yeah, I mean, anything that you feel like is going to solidify your skill set. So I don't endorse any particular program. I myself have done the Harvard Certificate in Data Science. I know that Cornell also has a program in machine learning. They have like a certificate they offer. It's like $2,500. The Harvard one is on sale right now. It's like $500. I will 100% on a personal level endorse DataCamp as a platform. It's like $300 a year. elementsofai.com. This is the website for the course. But DataCamp is something that's used widely in a lot of these courses. So if you were to go do the Harvard Certificate in Data Science, they actually have you do your assessments and things like that through DataCamp. And when I did go to school a little bit and took a data science class, they did a lot of their curriculum supplemented through DataCamp. DataCamp is an interactive platform. You don't really have to download or install anything, but they have nothing about coding at all. You can start on DataCamp and you can learn Python. Then you can learn data science, and then you can learn machine learning, like from zero to I'm cooking up my own models on that platform interactively, which is like something I haven't seen for any other field. And I use it all the time to brush up on my Python skills, to brush up on my R skills, depending on the project. Just like, man, I haven't worked with R in 2 years. Like, let me go back in and just do the foundations class real quick to jog my memory. So I highly recommend that platform just on a personal level. This is not an official Google endorsement.
All right. So here, next question is from Mahai. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. They say, do you think quantum computing will improve the AI systems? Do you have any leads in that direction?
Yeah, so actually Google has a quantum artificial intelligence team, and I 100% am a huge fan of quantum. That was also something that I was working on at Google, or at Microsoft when I was first, right before I left. I was doing a lot of stuff with Q#. Quantum computing, for those of you guys who don't know, are computers that, our computers right now are all zeros and ones. So they're all bits and bytes. It's either on or off, right? Think of like a light switch. It's on or it's off. So think of a quantum computer like a light dimmer. It's neither on or off, but it can also be anything in between. So like you could get a quantum computer that's just a couple of bytes that's more powerful than a whole data center, right? So the exponential computing power that will happen there, I personally do believe that quantum computing will be an accelerator of artificialized general intelligence, like we talked about, AGI, that AI that can like compute and act and think like humans. A lot of the limitations of AI right now is processing power. So I do think that quantum artificial intelligence will definitely power the age of artificial generalized intelligence that we've been seeing in sci-fi movies for years, but quantum computing isn't ready yet. So we're not 100% there. Quantum computing is not a service that's being sold. None of the market leaders have a sustainable, scalable quantum cloud yet. I know everyone's trying to build one. That's like another arms race that's going on, if you will, in the tech world. First, it was like, who could build the best machine learning platform? And now it's like, who could build the biggest quantum, data center, quantum qubit, and like the most stabilized way, because each company is exploring quantum from a slightly different way on like a technical and chemical level, because quantum computers is like a field of physics. And so they're all approaching it different way. different ways, exploring different parts of it. So I 100% do think that quantum computing is there. If you're interested in some of that research, you can go to Google's research blog. I personally don't work with that team very often, but I know that they have published a lot of research in the space. So you could hit up like Google AI research and just search it in quantum, and you'll see all the papers that have been kind of put out in that way. Or you could use Google Scholar too, like scholar.google.com, and you could be like, hey, quantum artificial intelligence, and just look up articles from folks who are not just Googlers, but like all of the research in that field. So if you don't know, scholar.google.com is how you search academic journals.
Awesome.